I'm Rose Bond. I live in Portland. I'm a real Northwest person. I was born in Victoria, Vancouver Island. And this kind of art, these images, these lozenges, this kind of stuff, have really been around in my life, more at a periphery, I think, for quite a long time. Sort of the essence of Vancouver Island, though I haven't lived there for many years. I think I feel like I have more than a passing knowledge of that place. Are these more people, or is this something else? Oh, okay. All right. Hi. That's all right. Again, thanks to Betsy, and also thanks to Dina Dart, who is the curator of Native American art here at the Portland Art Museum, and I had a chance to meet with Dina this week, and it's very helpful. So this is an artist response. I want to make it really clear that I am not an art historian, nor am I a specialist in Native or First Nations art. I am an animator and a media artist. I have a background in drawing and painting. I actually went to Portland State. And then through a series of, I don't know, draw events, whatever, I came to, I think, what was my calling in a night class at the Northwest Film Center. And that was doing animation, experimental animation with Roger Kukas. Took a night class, totally changed my life, made everything that I'd done before, all the drawings and stuff, seem like just one frame in a sequence that needed to be played out. So that's where I come from. I went on after a while of poking around and doing a lot of other things to get my MFA at the School of the Art Institute in Chicago, and that was again in experimental filmmaking. I didn't find that I fit exactly anywhere, but started making short films because I had no technical knowledge and because I thought it'd be interesting to do because no one had done it. Done much of it was draw on film. So my first 5 films were made by drawing directly on clear film leader, and then the story went on. So the most recent work that I've been doing, and probably for the last 12 years, has involved installation and multiple screens. So the latest one I did was in Old Town in December, and took a building on 3rd and Davis that's going to be the Society Hotel. It was an 1887 building, the Mariners Building, one of the first buildings to be aimed toward the housing sailors and keeping them away from all the evils, gambling, prostitution, what have you in Old Town. Good luck to you. And it was if you read the charter, and I did read the charter, it was you know, the Lovejoys, the Gleasons, all the wives of the good ladies, the names of the streets that were on the charter to get that building going. But it was a historic kind of look at that section of town, which has a very, very rich history in terms of its multi-ethnicity and the people that have passed through there. So far from being just a Chinatown, it is much more. It was the place in town where you could live if your skin had any tint of color in it for a very long time. So again, here I am. This is the piece I'm going to talk about, and there's another piece over there called Cabin Liner that we're going to get up and move to in about 15 or 20 minutes. But this is the piece. Why am I here? Why am I looking at this? I am a time-based artist. It's like I'm wired to deal with sequences. And I think that this object is meant to move. It's that idea of orchestrating the temporal and the spatial that ignites my mind. It's the little movies that then get transposed out into multiple screens that kind of sort of lights me up. And I think that that is in some way at the heart of this work too. This is a commissioned piece. It was made by Calvin Hunt Jr. If any of you know Native American art or Northwest art, you probably know the Hunt family. For about 30 years, I had lived with a bedroom with a Tony Hunt mask on the wall and a lovely Bill Reed kind of thing. So it was these works, contemporary works, are made maybe for a different reason, but not necessarily than the original reason that they were made. So this is, this time-based quality is what attracts me to the work, and especially to this piece, Raven to Sun Transformational Costume, it's called. This isn't meant to be static. It's not meant to be in that glass case. But despite all that, it is a piece of time-based art, I think. Kawakawa, let's see, Kwakwaka'wakw was the name it used to be called, and now it's Kwakwaka'wakw. Yeah, Kwakwaka'wakw. Anyway, hard to say, you gotta have a little click in there or whatnot. But yeah, Calvin Hunt was born in 1956. He's a nephew to Tony Hunt. And this really comes from a story that's known all around the coast. And it's The Raven Steals the Sun. But rather than talk about like its formal elements, like Bill Holm does in a book that he talks about Northwest Coast Indians and analysis of form, where he takes a kind of data-driven approach to this, where he's measuring all the lozenges and the distance between them, and he's making these comparisons between the motifs used in different tribes or clans all up and down the coast in a way to categorize the work, that I'm going to focus more on three things. One is cultural place. The second is performative function. And the third is social significance. And I'm going to do that all with this time-based lens. So cultural place. I don't know, how many people, anybody done the Inside Passage, the Alaska? Yeah, okay. That's the area we're talking about, all right? So it's like the work in these two rooms here starts at about mid-Vancouver Island, crosses over into BC, and then moves on up where you have the Haida on the Queen Charlotte Islands and on up, okay? And I think one thing that is really significant to me is with this Northwest, the Native art, or First Nations art, whatever, that when you read like the first exploits of the white settlers, the businessmen, the traders that come here, they are the kinds of things that they write. They're not writing about war stories. They're not writing about raiding parties. You know, instead, they're talking and writing about this elaborate ornamentation. They're talking about feasts. They're talking about dances. They're talking about this thing called potlatch, where people actually give stuff away. So it's like, not only was this wealth in the big house, it was sort of around the village. It wasn't only, if you think about it, it wasn't only in the church, where so many of sort of our ancestors or our whatever, where you had the village not doing so well, but the church had the gold things, the church had that. But with this, there seems to be a little more even distribution of household objects. You know, the spoons, your boat, you know, your hat, your storage bin, you know, your front door. I had the opportunity to go to Village Bay, which is up off the Johnstone Strait. So if you go way up to the tip of Vancouver Island, there's a place called Port Hardy. Take some boats across Alert Bay and whatnot, hooked up with a kayak group. And one of the places that we went was Village Island, Village Bay, which is one of the last villages with a number of standing native buildings. There's a totem pole that you see on postcards that I saw laying down on the ground. And it was like, no one was supposed to take that. I thought, that's on a postcard, you know? And it's like, no, that's going back to nature, you know? So it's like, in looking at that, every house wasn't this big, decorated kind of thing, but there's this culture that permeates through it. And that the economy was so rich that the people had time to create art. There's a I don't know how many people have come here for years, that ceremonial dish over there, been here for years, for a long time. Deanna told me this, that for a long time it was anonymous. It's like people didn't know who had done it. And what Dina did was she put something up on Facebook, you know, and had that picture and got it, you know, up around, going around Prince Rupert and these places. And sure enough, somebody goes, that's my uncle, that's Charlie, you know, that's, you know, and if you go over there and look, there's an old carver, that is the dish right in front of him, and there's all these little boys around him. Each one of those boys has been named. Each one of those boys have been named anymore. This kind of art no longer needs to be anonymous. But I think if you read like that Bill Holm book where he's talking about it, he'll actually say stuff like, they weren't very forthcoming, you know, or they didn't seem to recall what you know, or, well, Bill Reed was fairly friendly. But it's like, well, why would you be if somebody wants to come in and categorize your stuff? If that's what the value is of it, when really I think the value of this stuff was to be touched, to be danced with, to be experienced in some kind of visceral way. These like motifs and patterns, like this is a contemporary piece, okay? So he's using, but Calvin Hunt is using like the old Kwakwaka'wakw, you know, motifs. You know, he's using the colors, the black, the white, the red, but he's added kind of that orange color. But like with this kind of art, or in this clan, the drawn patterns actually mold over the sculptural forms. So they coincide with the carving. But I think more than like these patterns, more than, you know, certainly more than measuring their symmetry or whatnot, is that the importance is that they told stories. And the importance is that they danced. I hope this piece got to dance before it got put in its little box. But it's, the culture here was oral. It was deeply rooted in visual language and performance. Clans actually owned certain stories. Now the raven stealing the sun is like a kind of a generalist sort of stories, but Dina was telling me that not only could you give away your goods, your spoons, your chests, your blankets, you could also give away your stories. And why would you do that? It's sort of like by giving then, that clan has the right to tell that story and attribute it to you, you know? So you're spreading your brand in a way. If you think about it, it's like, you know, how do we understand? Why would people give this? Why do you give this stuff away? What is this kind of economy? And again, I think it's really important to think of it as being in the Northwest with this wealth of salmon, this wealth of food. I mean, you just had to figure out a way to keep out of the rain, you know, pretty good. So, yeah, each tribe had its own kind of pictorial vocabulary, and I do believe it kind of branded them, and it provided a communal identity, and it provided a prestige. that in that communal, in that identity, in that there was a kind of prestige. Let's talk about the performative function of this. If any of you are familiar with structural anthropology and Claude Levi-Strauss, if you're familiar with, probably less familiar with a guy named Vladimir Propp, who wrote The Morphology of the Folktale, that what these two thinkers had in common was that stories could be analyzed and sort of simmered down to a few stories, underlying stories. I can't remember, it's like somebody said, there's only 24 stories in the world or something, you know, so that these myth narratives become a kind of finite few. They do tell a story, but they also transmit values. They tell you about pitfalls, and they happen in a community. This particular piece was made to move. It's made to make noise. Those feathers, those little clapper things on the back, that's cedar. It's gonna make noise. It's gonna stir up dust. When I was up in Village Bay, I had an opportunity to go to, it was Alert Bay. I had an opportunity to go to a performance. And so you went into a big house, kind of like this, and the flooring was, I can't remember if it must have been wood, but it seemed like there was a lot of the outside inside. And because there wasn't any unnatural lighting or whatever, it didn't seem like there was. It was fire or it was whatever. And so there was a little bit of smokiness in there. There were dancers. There were kids who kind of wanted to get out there. There were the tourists, white tourists, kayakers, you know, who are coming to see this sort of stuff. If you look over in the other room at some of the things, there's these hats made out of ermine and stuff. And what they used to do apparently is put eagle down in them so that when they danced, this stuff would fluff out. It's like you're breathing it. You're in it. It's the real deal. It's like, it's not, you know, it's meant to be participated in some kind of, some kind of visceral way. In talking about the social significance of this piece, these objects, especially like the mask or this transformational mask, I mean, if you close it up, it's the raven. And the raven is doing all this stuff and being like what the raven does. It's just probably a little bit like what coyote does, you know. And until finally steals the sun, opens up, there's the sun, everybody, you know, whatever. So the story isn't static. It isn't this pose. It's meant to be a sequence of things that happen. And quite literally unfold to reveal a message. And in that are all these sort of variables of move, distractions, you know, and where it's performed. I mean, people would take this costume or whatever, might go to the Potlatch in the other, you know, across the island, across the strait, or whatever, and you'd want to put on a good show there, you know, so people would remember. What this kind of stuff, I think, calls for is a kind of active engagement of the senses. When we come here, it's a pretty modulated environment. It needs to be, they got to preserve the stuff or whatever. But you go to these unmodulated environments, it's like, is it a sunny day? Is it a rainy day? What do I remember? All those things sort of come in. It's a dynamic, shared experience. In thinking again, just sort of winding this up on the idea of a social experience, these pieces, they speak to a pride. They speak to a level of craft that is revered. And they also speak, I think, to an esteeming of this thin veil between human and animal. we've all, I think, had a brush with this kind of romanticized view of Indians and their love of nature and blah, 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 and that I respect the rock and all of that. And somehow I feel like, speaking for myself, that doesn't really, I never really grok it. You know, kind of like, what are they, you know, what's it about? But when you start to, you know, like have these kind of sort of experiences, you begin to think, oh, okay. And now in art or in philosophy, we do have people like Jane Bennett, who's writing her book, Vibrant Matter. Or we have Tim Morton, who's writing a book, Queer Ecology. And it's like what they're doing is they're taking my world that I knew, that St. Thomas Aquinas, God dang it, you know, that I learned in high school. You know, it's like God's here, angels here, humans here. And then down below we have dominion over the rest, okay? And people are questioning that now, questioning that in a way that these folks kind of had it you know, figured out, waiting for us to sort of get on that. But I want to leave this on this note and move to the other piece, because I'm thinking of kind of that hegemony of Western thought, where we only see what's in front of us and we keep repeating kinds of the same things. And if it's outside of that, it's other, it's primitive, it's whatnot. But it's like valuing these, or at least recognizing these other ways of thinking. So what I'd like to do now is move for this last shorter part of the talk over to the cabin liner. Kind of had their own thing going. But what I want to talk about is this, and an experience that I had being involved in my first museum installation. And that was a piece called Sacred Encounters. And it was curated and put together by a woman here in town, Jackie Peterson. And what it was a meeting of the Salish people of Western Montana with Father de Schmidt in 1860s in Western Montana. Father de Schmidt, big guy, came out kind of on his own to spread Catholicism, to do what I think most of the well-meaning missionaries at the time were trying to do, is, you know, help these primitive people. And they also felt like, because of the devastation of disease and whatnot, that this was going to be a vanishing race. Well, surprise, it's not. But here's the thing that I saw, that one of the things, there were a lot of things in that exhibit. It was like 9 rooms with a lot of sound, a lot of AV. It went to LA, it went to whatever. And my role in it was really small. I just did a 3-screen animation. It was like the early 90s. It was the first time I had done an animation that was beyond 1 screen. And people walked in. And so you're looking at these big scrims that are hung, and you can't see everything. Because what you're seeing here is you're not seeing there, you're not seeing there. And I just got, wow, this is a different kind of thing. This is a different kind of viewing. And to me, it seemed like an active kind of viewing. And at that point, I thought, whoa. It's like, what's the difference between this and me making these films where people sit in their seat and watch, and it just washes over them, or they watch TV, they zone, they want to be entertained, they want whatever. As opposed to this other thing about, what, did you see that? And you talk to somebody? You know, so this kind of active viewing. But getting back to this piece, in Sacred Encounters were 2 drawings, actually several drawings, but one of them was called Ambrose and Blackfeet on Horse. It was a pen and ink drawing done in the 1840s, maybe 1840, 1847 is what they did, and it was drawn by Ambrose Five Crows, who was a Plateau Salish. So again, this Plateau Salish were the Salish that lived up in western Montana. The Coast Salish are the ones we know that lived around Astoria and whatnot. But way up on the flat, or up there, there was this guy, Ambrose Five Crows, who was very friendly with the priests. And there was one of the priests was named Nicholas Point. He was a Jesuit priest, and he was quite a good illustrator. And so here is this scene, okay, where Ambrose Five Crows is recalling a story that he was involved in. 500 Blackfeet lodges, he says, versus 200 Salish. Okay, the Salish and the Blackfeet, longtime enemies, didn't get along. Guess what? Guess who got put on the same reservation together? Yeah, Salish and Blackfeet. Okay, Flathead is, yeah. Anyway, that's what that is. But he was talking about this story where he was involved in this battle, and he broke his bow. He broke his bow, so he was sort of down on the ground, bowless. He sees one of the Blackfeet coming toward him, and he calls out to him in Blackfoot language. Calls out to him. And the guy pulls him over, and he finds one that has a rifle. Calls out to him. The guy comes over, picks him up, grabs him on the back of the horse. He wrestles the rifle away, shoots the guy, takes off on the horse. Okay? So he draws a drawing to depict that. And Nicholas Point does a drawing to depict that. What's the difference between the two? What do you think Nicholas Point would draw? He's going to draw the cover of the New Yorker. He's going to draw something, one picture that encapsulates that key moment. That's the Western thought. One picture, one that just sort of communicates it all. What Ambrose did was he has this little horse hooves that go around that show this, and then this happened. And then horse hoofs go on, and then this skirmish happened, and this one goes around, and this one goes around. Okay? It's like, how cinematic, how to be thinking sequentially in time. How to take these moments that you can say, yeah, and then, dude, we had the guy on the ground, and we took, whatever. Or you go over here and you say, oh, yeah, and then that reminds me of taking little scalp there or whatever, So it's like you see this whole timeline. As an animator, this makes me think of storyboards. It makes me think of animatics. It makes me think of this whole way of thinking kind of linearly. There was another one that they did that talked about another one of Ambrose's exploits. He must have been quite a talker. But he was talking about the Salish, again, had surrounded this Blackfoot fort, and he had his war medicine, has a little bag, and he was just thinking, okay, before we got the place surrounded, but I'm going to sneak in, and I'm going to, what do they call, counting coup? Yeah, taking coup, yeah. Goes in, and he touches one of the Blackfeet and gets away. Just touches it. Gets away and comes back, and everybody's all pumped up about that, I think. But it's the drawing that Nicholas Point did, the Jesuit priest, is again about these warriors on the Salish on horses beating up, kind of this one scene of a fight. But with Ambrose, again you see the outline representing the people abstracted. And in the center, you see these rifles aimed at the center. And in the center is this little sort of stick figure on an oval short thing with kind of a couple of lines in it. It's like, oh, that's the fur that he's sleeping on. And there's Ambrose reaching out. The guy's sleeping like this. And there's his little spidery little stick figure hand touching the hand. It's like touching the hand. It's like, okay, so it's like these differences in thinking. And how I link this kind of linear thinking is to a guy named Hans Richter. Hans Richter was born in 1888. He was born in Berlin. He was early into art circles. So in 1916, he was actually one of the guys who joined the Dadaist movement in Zurich. And he was, with the devastation of World War I, he, like many artists, or a few artists, I guess, were really, really dissatisfied with the way art was going. The camera had been invented. What's the point of realism? You know, what makes sense now? With science coming on, what makes sense with this horrible devastation that humanity has done to humanity and whatnot? And so in this Dadaist group, he met a guy named Viking Eggling, best name ever, who was also an abstract artist. These guys were abstract painters, pretty much. And they started doing a series of experiments together that led them from painting to scrolls and finally to film. What they were looking for, and Richter writes really well about this in a book called Experimental Animation. He has a wonderful essay. I'm sure it's reprinted from some magazine or something, but in the 50s. But he talks about his quest to find a new language for art. His quest to not use representation, to use abstractions. His quest that was frustrating to find that even cubism was inadequate for what he thought needed to happen. And what they found was a couple of things. In doing the scroll work, what they did is they had looked at Japanese scrolls. What they began to do was look at different forms, different elements, and see what the transformation, what that pattern would be in between those. And the other thing I think that's really important in here, sort of like, is a quote that they came upon. It's a quote now. It was actually some guy talking back then. Theo van Doesburg. And here's what Theo van Doesburg said. He said, "The square is a sign of new humanity." The square is a sign of new humanity. It's something like the cross of the early Christians. Richter was kind of perturbed by this to begin with, and then he began to think about the square. He made a film in 1921 called Rhythm 21. He knew nothing about filmmaking or whatever. He saw a camera in the window. But he felt like moving from scrolls, where your eye had to make these connections, where your eye had a choice, that to him seemed more active, more engaging. And he looked toward film to also do that, because if you're an animator or whatever, you look at film, it is a frame by frame kind of way of making work. So the idea from the scrolls then was this series of images, and his challenge was to work with this idea of continuity and this idea of an invitation of the eye to meditate and to create a kind of dynamic relationship, a process that created energy, which grew as relationships were made, as connections multiplied. So I think this piece can almost be read as a score in a way that I don't know if you've ever seen like dancers write a score, the Laban method or whatever. It's like, it's a series of fragments that are linked together. I think that my interest in this kind of orchestration of time and image that led me to film, led me from film to, again, back to multi-image work, where people have choices of what they're looking at in the way that you would when that costume is danced. You could be looking at that dancer, you could be looking at the other things, and you're pulling together all that stuff with the drums, with whatever, with who's ever beside you. This kind of living moment that I find now when I do my installations. When I'm in Old Town last month and I'm out on the street and I'm looking up there and those images, those animations are happening in the windows, and a guy comes up to me rolling his wheelchair going, "You made this, didn't you? You made this, didn't you?" It's sort of like, "Yeah, I made it." He says, "This is cool. This is really cool." You know, it's kind of like, whoa. It's like what's happening on the street here is as interesting as what's happening in my windows, you know? It's sort of like it isn't even my stuff anymore. It like belongs to the building, belongs to the neighborhood. And I think that in this spirit that art is made of community, of social connection, is an important thing. And so I wanted to respond to this work. And that's, I think, about it. I just have one other thing to say is I do think that the screen is here to stay. And I think the screens that I'm carrying in my pocket or whatever, that screen-based work and screens are going to be more and more ubiquitous. They're going to be in our lives. That how we deliver information is going to be more and more visual. And it's like the content of that right now a lot of times is controlled by certain interests out to make a buck, to make money or whatever. But I do think that artists, as they get like this equipment, this kind of gear, this kind of stuff, that you will see a new way of using the screen, or a way of using the screen. You'll even see screens, I think, in more and more in, I mean, museums still have some, though they like the performative stuff more. But I happened to be in New York a few months ago for the LG Art of the Pixel contest, and one of our students took the first place, the grand prize. But we were back there, and what's his name? Neil Patrick Harris was the spokesperson for LG, and he was talking, and one of his pitches was, these are these new TV sets. They're like that thin, they're so light, you put them up, they look beautiful, they have a beautiful black frame on them, and the pixel count in them is like, it's called 4K. If you look at HD, it's 1920 by 1080, which means it's about 2,000 pixels wide. This is 4,000 pixels wide, okay? And the critical thing is the black. When a pixel is supposed to be black, these new TVs, that pixel turns off, okay? What's wrong with most TVs, what's wrong with most projections, I think, is you never get black. You just get this kind of gray mush, okay? So what happens with this is people on Good Morning America look terrible, but art looks fabulous. You see the tooth of the paper, you see the shades of the watercolor. And those TVs are so smart now, you just plug it in so you don't have to go, where's my remote, you know? It's all of this stuff I think is going to be happening. And so, yeah, that's just a little glimpse of the future, certainly a past or a present that is with us now that shows us, I think, what this idea of sequential work, the beauty of this idea, what's behind sequential work. So I hope I've shed a little bit of light on that today. And I'll take any comments or questions and if people have any. Yeah. Well, lots to talk about. I think we could continue this conversation. Is that right, Betsy? Yeah.